Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Costello with NBC News, and we have an exciting and really, I think, a riveting conversation for you today. This is part of NBC News Universal's News Group partnership with Aspen Ideas Health, and the topic today is medical research in space. And we've got some fascinating women to talk to about this. To begin with, Dr. Serena Anjon, Chancellor. She is a NASA astronaut and a physician who logged 197 days in space in 2018 on the International Space Station. And then we've got Haley Arsenault, and she is set to become the youngest American ever to go into space on the first all-civilian voyage set to depart later this year. Now, this is the cover of St. Jude magazine, and that's Haley on the cover. Just got this magazine in the mail. And Haley is a physician assistant at St. Jude. Now, this is part of an all-civilian mission, and no veteran astronauts on board at all. They are going up on a multi-day mission, a trip around the Earth on a SpaceX rocket, probably towards the end of September or so. On the Today Show recently, we profiled Haley and the group that's going up on this all-civilian mission, and here's a clip from that. The Inspiration 4 crew now complete. 38-year-old Commander Jared Isaacman, the billionaire with the dream, fly to space on a SpaceX rocket and raise a staggering $200 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital. 29-year-old Haley Arsenault, representing hope, a childhood cancer survivor and now a physician's assistant at St. Jude. And this morning, two new crew members revealed. 41-year-old Chris Zimbrowski, representing generosity, chosen from among those who've donated to St. Jude. An Air Force veteran now working in the aerospace industry. A friend was actually selected, but he can't go. And 51-year-old Dr. Siam Proctor, representing prosperity. A pilot and community college science professor, once a NASA astronaut candidate, now a passionate space advocate. Haley, let's start with you because we just come out of this clip. This is an exciting all-civilian mission, but you have this unusual connection to medicine and to St. Jude, and now to this mission, and that you, at the age of 10, were struggling with bone cancer, and you survived, and then you decided to stake out a career at St. Jude as a physician assistant. Why do you want to go into space now?
Well, St. Jude called me at the beginning of January and told me about this mission, this first all-civilian mission to space, and how it was being used for good and to benefit St. Jude. And we're hoping through this mission to raise $200 million for the hospital that will fund research and fund cures. But on top of that, I realized that this mission was going to give these kids going through cancer and other survivors hope and show them that they don't need to limit themselves because they can do so much. And so I immediately said yes and was so honored to be invited and part of this mission.
In fact, you're going to be the first person ever in space who wears a prosthesis, right?
I have an internal prosthesis. I had bone cancer, and in order to save my leg, St. Jude had to remove part of my bone that was affected by the tumor, and they replaced it with this internal prosthesis that could be expanded without surgery. And it saved me several surgeries over the years, and it gave me so much more quality of life. But I will be the first person in space with an internal prosthesis.
Okay, we're going to get back to more on that in a minute, but let's go to Serena. Serena, you were in her place just a few years ago, and you had a deep medical bench, a background before you went on that mission. So how did your medical training prepare you for that mission?
You know, Tom, the interesting thing is, first of all, Haley, I'm so excited for you. I cannot wait to see how this mission goes and all that you'll get to experience, because I was stunned when I got up there on the space station in 2018 at how much of the life science research we do on board ISS is to benefit human health on Earth, and that includes cancer research. So as a physician, and I'm a physician today here at LSU, I love to work on things that matter to my patients, that my patients can react to and respond to. And so when I got up there and said, wow, I'm working on projects looking at cancer research, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, these are all things that affect people and people that I care about, and certainly patients that I treat. And so that was probably the biggest boon for me, was to realize how much benefit I was going to get even during that short time period performing this research.
Serena, a little bit more on that. I've wondered this question for years, covering NASA for the better part of 17 years now. Do we have good, tangible, scientific discoveries that we can point to that we've made in space on any number of topics as it relates to medicine? Do we have good medical breakthroughs or cancer research that really has paved new ground?
Yeah, Tom, absolutely. One of the experiments I worked on was one called AngioX, where we were looking at the cells that actually line your blood vessels. Those are called endothelial cells, but that's what tumors use to build a blood supply. And what the scientists proposed with that was that those cells would grow different, would grow better in the microgravity environment. They're a little harder to grow on Earth, so you can test different chemotherapy against them, but up on orbit, they like to grow, and it's easier for us to test those chemotherapeutic agents. I hadn't really thought about that until I got up there, and I got to talk with the scientists every day and look at these cells under a microscope, and immediately I could see the impact that this would have on cancer treatment.
And has that already translated into therapies or therapeutic breakthroughs on any level, in any kind of a disease already?
I think we're certainly very close. The other interesting thing that we've looked at with cancer chemotherapy is certain companies have sent up their chemotherapeutic agent that's already in use for cancer treatment across the globe to see if they can refine it, make it better, track and how those liquids and everything, and even like nanoparticle transport, how that works in microgravity. So there's so many examples I could give that are already in practice and things that are just about to burst over the edge.
Okay, so back now to Haley. And Haley, you guys are going to be doing some research or at least experiments up on your mission. It's only a few-day mission, we believe. But can you give us a sense of what you'll be doing up there?
So we're still working out the details of the research projects that we're going to work on, but we are going to be deeper into space than people have gone in about 15 years, and that comes with a different radiation profile. And so we would like to measure that and the effects after that, which of course, coming from my background with oncology, I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, that's an important point because you do have, you've got a very personal connection because not only did you have a personal experience with bone cancer, you're in the oncology ward at St. Jude right now.
I work inpatient with leukemia and lymphoma patients as a PA. I have the best job ever.
And how does your experience, having been a child cancer survivor, how does that help you in your job every day?
So I like to, basically show these kids every day that they can grow up and they can achieve their dreams. And, it's not the first thing I talk to them about. It's always about the patient but then I like to share with them that I also was in their shoes, especially with the newly diagnosed patients. Because I remember when I was going through treatment and I would meet a survivor and, their hair had come back and they had grown up, and I just remember feeling hope when I met them. And so I try to share that with them.
A few years ago, Serena, Scott Kelly spent a year in space, and he has a twin, Mark Kelly, who's also an astronaut. And so they used that opportunity to compare how Scott's body changed over that course of the year versus how his brother, being the control sample on Earth, whether there were things that changed. And one thing that they noticed was that they had a very slight difference in a piece of chromosome, and I'll let you discuss it because I'm going to get into college biology and I have no business being there. But the bottom line is they did discover that he had some shortening and then lengthening of his telomeres, which are at the end of chromosomes, right?
That's correct. So what they did find towards the end of Scott's flight was that there was an actual lengthening, first a shortening, then a lengthening of the telomeres. Once Scott landed back on Earth, those kind of quickly resolved back to where he probably would have been had he remained on Earth. But it was curious because a lot of people see extended periods of time and space and they equivalent that to aging. And, for example, we lose a lot of bone in space. We have loss of muscle mass, there's muscle atrophy. And so those are things that we track certainly when you're up there for 6 months and 12 months at a time. And could that lead to new discoveries in the treatment of osteoporosis? Absolutely. But it's something that even on the time that Haley's up in orbit, that those short 3 or 4 days, if you were to take a look at her urine, the first 12 hours that she's up there, you would see those microscopic changes in her urine, indicating that there's bone loss. It happens that quickly.
You know, when Scott came back to Earth, I talked to him multiple times, and he conceded he felt awful. And it wasn't just a one-off that lasted 12 hours. He felt awful for a good period of time before his body recovered, because he had been in space, in orbit for a year, and didn't have that constant gravitational pull. That's going to be a challenge if we ever send people on an 18-month, maybe 3-year mission to Mars and back, right?
Yeah, Tom, you read my mind. So even when I came back after about, 6 to 7 months, boy, you don't feel great this first 24 hours. There's a lot of things your body is suddenly readapting to, your brain, your muscles, everything, to this gravity stimulus that has been absent for so long. And now you picture, heading out towards Mars, maybe a short surface, say, and then coming all the way back and now being reintroduced to Earth's gravity once again. What is that going to feel like? What countermeasures can we put on that vehicle to help prevent some of those changes on the way out and on the way back? It's a totally new domain. It's a different world. Exploration class missions are what we need to do, and we need to prepare to head towards Mars. But that's the same concerns that we have, Tom.
Yeah, I interviewed the head of NASA a number of years ago, and we talked about the potential for going to Mars someday. And he said, listen, we got 2 big problems. Number one, we got to make sure that that the crew doesn't kill each other, because that's a long time to be sitting on top of each other in something that's about the size of a school bus if you're lucky. So that's number one. Number two, we got to figure out how not to get killed by the radiation exposure with that kind of a long duration mission. I mean, that still is a problem that they don't really have cracked yet, right?
That's correct. Space radiation is one of our biggest challenges, both towards human health and in the research domain, because it's so difficult to perform here on the planetary surface. On the space station, in low Earth orbit, you're pretty well protected by the atmosphere, the magnetic field, and by the vehicle itself. And the moment we set out, just like Haley mentioned, she's going to be in a different orbital profile where her radiation field is going to be different than what we even experience on ISS. And so as many measurements as we can get to characterize that field and then predict what the health effects may be will help. But Tom, space radiation is one of our biggest challenges.
Okay, so Haley, back to you now, and you're on this mission that's taking off within the next 6 months or so, and you are a cancer survivor. I'm guessing you've had to have conversations with medical personnel at SpaceX about your own personal history with cancer and whether there should be any concern about radiation exposure, even if it is for just a few days.
I've talked to my St. Jude doctors, my orthopedic surgeon, and then the SpaceX physicians as well. And we feel confident that with our short duration mission that the radiation exposure won't be significant. But that is something that we've talked about.
So you are the chief medical officer on board this flight. That's a big promotion for a PA. Congratulations.
Thank
But
you.
let me ask you, what will you be watching as it relates to the health of your crew?
Any concerns that they have, I will be there for them. And, I think as part of the research, they said I'll be drawing some blood and I'll have some activities like that on board, but then I'll also prepare for any type of emergency that could arise.
I guess any kind of an emergency would mean it could be literally just a cut or something like that, right? You hope it's nothing more serious than that. Hopefully nobody has a cardiac event.
Absolutely. And we're going to be prepared, and I've already started those conversations with the SpaceX physicians, and we'll make sure that our crew stays safe.
So to that end, will they be giving you any extra training, for example, in, God forbid, there is that kind of an emergency? Will you have necessary drugs on board? Will you have a defibrillator, anything of that nature?
I'm not exactly sure what payload we're going to bring up, but I will be getting some extra training for any possible in-flight situation.
Let's underscore that there is this kind of an unusual symbiotic relationship between SpaceX, the billionaire Jared Isaacman, who is footing the bill for this, and this massive fundraising effort to raise $200 million for St. Jude, which is the biggest fundraising effort ever in St. Jude's history, which is why you're on the cover of the magazine. Serena, can we come back to you? We have been flying people in space now for about 60 years or so, almost, right? And I'm wondering, what are the biggest medical what's the biggest piece of medical knowledge that you would say we've gained over that period of time? I was reading recently that when we first sent people into Earth, we didn't know if their eyeballs would float out of their eye sockets. We had such a limited idea of what the exposure would do to us.
Yeah, I think when we first sent people, we didn't know if they'd be able to swallow and digest food normally. And it turns out your body works really well in the space environment, but things do change. And what I would tell you, Tom, is that we haven't finished discovering what happens, what different changes occur in the human body. We do have changes in the eyes. We see maybe some swelling around the optic discs. We, of course, see the bone loss, the muscle mass atrophy. There have been recent reports about even clotting and clotting events that we've seen in space. And we seem to be surprised, and it's only because we have a limited number of people that have flown in space for a limited amount of time. So I'd say we're not done discovering yet.
Yeah, Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly are about my size. We're not giants. We're all about 5'7", 5'8" or so. Scott said, the greatest thing happened when I was up there. My spinal cord expanded a bit, so he gained an inch or so. And then when he came back to Earth, he lost the inch. And he said, I was so close to gaining an inch or two. But I've talked to astronauts who've said, especially tall astronauts, who've said that when they are on station, their spine really hurts because of the expansion in their spinal cord because there's not the gravity that's kind of keeping the vertebrae all together.
Yeah, I'd say the first few days I definitely had a little bit of pain kind of in the mid portion of my back. A lot of astronauts have that in the mid to low portion. So much in that the first few nights it would kind of wake me up from sleep, and I had to crunch my legs into a little bit of a fetal position to relieve that strain. That is very common. It went away after about 3 days in flight. Some people don't have it at all. But yeah, we do see that commonly. These are some of the things I hope to get to talk with Haley about before she gets to fly.
So can we ask you how difficult, you're the only one here who's been in space, how difficult is it to sleep in space?
So Tom, I'm going to be honest. I think I was on one end of the spectrum. I loved sleeping in space, and I slept very well. I think there's a gamut. There's a bell-shaped curve. But I will say that at least on station, we had very quiet, dark crew quarters, so it was a little easier for me to sleep. Going to be a little different for Haley. She's obviously going to be a little closer to her crewmates, but with the right earplugs and eye protection and everything, I slept really well.
Okay, now I've got to ask you the delicate question, and that is, a lot of people have wondered, how do you deal with GI issues, to put it in a very G-rated conversation form here? Do things process normally when you're on station, especially if you're up there for as long as you were?
Yeah, surprisingly they do. Again, early days people thought, would food move through your intestinal tract the same? And it does. Something called peristalsis, which forces that food along the food pipe and through the intestines, works beautifully. So I'd say the challenging part is not getting that food to move through the system. We try and stay really well hydrated. It's making sure that when you have to use the space toilet, you do so very carefully with all protections in place to make sure there's nothing escaping.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think we all get the picture. What are you most looking forward to learning about, Haley, on your first trip into space? What big unanswered question do you have? What do you want to experience? What are you thinking about this?
I have so many personal questions, such as, that overview effect. When somebody sees Earth from space for the first time, I'm just dying to know what that feels like. And I know that going to space is going to change me forever. And I want to know in what ways. And the only way I'll get the answers to these questions is going to be going to space.
When you come back, have you thought about how this is going to change your career? In other words, do you envision going back and getting yet another science-related degree, or how do you envision this is going to change your life?
I have my dream job, and I have been wanting to be a PA at St. Jude for the past 19 years since I was treated here. And so now that I have my dream job, I'm holding on to this. And, I think I'll be able to use my experiences of going to space to talk to my patients about it. And this mission is already giving my patients so much hope because they're all telling me they want to be astronauts now. And I love when they say that because not only are they thinking about growing up, but also achieving dreams and knowing that they can do anything they want. And so I think it's my responsibility to come back and continue sharing this with these kids.
That's just fantastic. Okay, back to you, Dr. Chancellor, Serena. Having spent so much time on orbit, and having the background you do, what is the biggest question that you still have that you would like answered, specifically about how we can use space to advance the medical frontier in some way?
So honestly, I'd like to know, how much can we expand the use of the International Space Station, of this beautiful orbiting laboratory, to accomplish as much science as possible? When we were up there in orbit, our day is mapped out to 5-minute increments because we're trying to perform so much science at one time. And I was trying to picture, hey, if we had 10 people or 12 or 15 or folks that you're bringing up from private companies just for a month at a time, which we're going to start doing, how much could we achieve then? We just need people power, space, and time. And I think our output could be phenomenal from ISS.
Serena, any advice you might offer to Haley before she heads off on this mission?
Yeah, Tom, thanks for letting me answer that. I kind of wish I would have heard some of this before I started training, and I did partway through, so it helped. But Haley, what I would tell you is, your mission is it's actually a very, very small part of the journey you're about to embark on. And the training leading up to it, the people you meet, the people you get to interact with, the folks that you will inspire even before launching is huge. Take advantage of that. Just enjoy every moment. Certainly the launch, the mission, the landing are going to be awesome. And then afterwards, it's really your responsibility, your duty to take that mission forward for as many years as you can, to inspire as many people as you can.
And Haley, any question that you may have or questions for Serena?
Well, right now we're working on our packing list. And so I think the biggest question on all our minds is, what should we bring to space?
Yeah, I loved bringing pictures of my family. Certainly, I had, special necklaces with things that my husband gave me that I carried that was very special to me and kept close to my heart. And I'll tell you the fun thing that I brought, and I'm so glad I did, and I handed it off to the next crew, was my back scratcher. It was awesome.
Oh, okay. Did not think of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys are terrific. Hey, thank you both. You were a great, fascinating conversation. And Haley, wishing you well. We're going to be watching closely over the coming months.
Thank you.
You bet. And thank you for watching. Again, I'm Tom Costello with NBC News in Washington. This has all been a part of the NBC Universal News Group's partnership with the 2021 Aspen Ideas Health Festival. And if you'd like to watch it again, you can hit the rewind button or invite your friends to watch it. For now, I'm Tom Costello, NBC News in Washington.